Alrighty, well, good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Andrew Daphne. I'm the Instruction and Outreach Librarian at the New Jersey State Library. And it's my pleasure to present our speaker for today, Paul Sakala. Paul Sakala is a certified global career development facilitator, a work search author, and founder of Sakala Career Consultants. Since 1999, he has assisted over 3,000 job seekers, ranging from C-suite executives to college students. Paul specializes in creating job search project plans and is recognized for his empathetic listening skills. Paul currently facilitates job seeker networking groups for 4 different organizations. He has helmed the adult professional education programs for 2 colleges and a New Jersey Department of Labor one-stop career center. Paul has his BS in psychology from Florida Institute of Technology, and he has published a book and numerous articles on career coaching in a variety of publications. So welcome, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we jump into your presentation, I just want to run through a few of the housekeeping items, and it won't take very long. First and foremost, we will be taking your questions throughout the program today. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll address them as they come in. This program is being recorded, so don't worry if you miss anything. A link will be shared to everybody who registered once the recording is uploaded. There will be a survey at the end of the webinar, so if you have time, we ask that you please complete the survey. We always love hearing your feedback. And if you want some more information about how maybe Paul can help you or some more advice on advancing your career, you can visit Casella Career Consultants homepage, which is on the slide on the screen. I will be sending a live link to that out in the chat once we get underway. The last thing I have for you, I just want to do a brief overview of the Zoom dashboard. This is what your dashboard should look like if you're using a PC or a Mac. If you're using a mobile device, the dashboard may look a little bit different, but all of the features will still be there. First, in the bottom left-hand corner, you will see your audio settings. This is where you can check if you're using an external listening device, like a headset or earbuds, to make sure that the device is connected properly. At any point during the presentation, if you run into any problems, there is a raise hand button here in the middle. You can click on that. That'll alert me, and I will send you a message in Zoom and hopefully be able to resolve any of the problems that you're having. As I mentioned before, if you have any questions, you can either use the chat or the Q&A buttons. Either of them will alert us, and we'll be happy to address them as the presentation goes along. That is everything that I have for you. So it is my pleasure now to turn it over to Paul.
Thank you, Andrew. It's great to be here. I am really excited to do this presentation for you all as well. And I want to just make sure you are seeing the correct screen, Andrew.
Yep, looks good.
Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about how do you create a target market for your job search. And it's one step in the project planning methodology that I espouse as the best way to find a job. So today we're going to actually look at 2 steps: the project, creating the target market, and how do you research those. And they are a part of the preparation that I think you should do in order to start your job search. You get these 4 milestones done right up front first, and then you're ready with the foundation you need, all the information you need, all the documentation done to be able to do a really high quality, highly effective job search. And if you want more information on the whole methodology, just let me know and I'll be happy to talk to you about them. By the way, feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'd be happy to talk with you about your job search and ways that we can improve that for you. So specifically, what are we going to cover today? We'll look at why do we want to do a targeted job search? What are the 3 variables that create a targeted search? And then how does that help us to expand our view of where we're going to work? And then help us to focus in on how do we go after those specific organizations. So we'll look at all of these things in a little more detail. Let's start with, why do we want to do this? And I think there are really 4 primary reasons why targeting your job search is going to be really powerful in giving you a focused and effective search. And the first thing is that it's going to help to expand your view of where you want to work. And you'll see how that's going to happen as we get into the next slide or two and talk about the different variables involved in a targeted search. The other thing that it's going to help us with is, it's going to get us focused in on which things are the ones to start with, and where do we go second, and where do we go third. And maybe most importantly, it's going to give us some real specific information that we can share with the people whom we network with on how they can best help us in our job search. So we want to be very productive in our search. We want to be focused, but we also want to make sure that we have a large enough search that we're going to be successful. And targeting our job search is going to do all of those things for us. So let me show you a little bit more about how that's going to work. A targeted job search has 3 variables. And every time we change one of those variables, we've created a new target market for our search. So the first of those variables is the location. Where do we want to work? The second would be, what industry do we want to work in? And finally, the variable would be, what is our role or function? How are we going to put all of those things together to identify the organizations that we most want to go after for a job? Oftentimes I'll ask job seekers, can you give me the names of just 5 companies, 5 organizations that you are currently working to get a job with? Most people can't give me those names. But if you could, well, then I could look at my network and say, okay, who do I know that works in those organizations? And can I make an introduction for you into that organization so you have a better chance of getting a job? So we need to create that list of names, and this is how we're going to do it. So let's start by looking at what a target market chart would look like. Simply, I'm going to list my location, my industry, or my role or function. And then how many people get hired to do that job within all of those organizations in that target market? And can I list out all of those targets? Anytime we change any one of these 3 things, we've created a whole new target market list. So let's look at my target market chart as an example to go through this. So the first thing we want to do is define the ideal geography in which we want to work. And that could be remote, it could be hybrid. I would argue with you that today, hybrid work is more likely than remote work. The market is changing dramatically for a host of reasons, not the least of which is the states are starting to crack down more on employers that are operating, that have employees working in their state, and yet that company is not licensed or registered to work in that state. And the problem is now the company's not paying taxes to that state for both the employee taxes as well as the corporate revenue taxes. The employee is not paying unemployment insurance and other taxes into that state, but yet when the employee is now unemployed, they're going to be going to that state in which they live and saying, I want unemployment insurance. And so the states are cracking down on that and forcing the companies to make payments to those tax systems, and that's causing a burden on a lot of companies. So many organizations are starting to recall their employees and have them in the office at least 2 or 3 days a week so that they can say the employee is working in the state in which the organization is licensed to work and all of the taxes are in line, as well as some other issues. So if you're looking for fully remote work, you might want to adjust your expectations a little bit. I see there's somebody's got something in the chat. So let's see. Oh, that's just Andrew putting in my contact information, which I had already put in there as well, so that's great. Do we have any questions, though, at this point? Anything that I've talked about before I get too deep into this first level of the chart? Okay, not seeing any hands go up or any chat. I'll move on then. So we're going to look at where do we want to work in terms of geography. We talked a little bit about remote versus hybrid. This is a place, though, where you want to dream. Think a little bit, close your eyes and say, if I could work anywhere in the world, where are those places that I would most want to work? Now, using me as the example, I'd really like to stay in northern New Jersey where I live. My family is not really keen on the idea of leaving this area, so I need to stay here. So my first goal would be to stay within a 20-mile radius of my home. That way the commute's not going to be too bad. It's a good thing. If I can't find a job within that 20-mile radius of home, then the second best option would be to stay in northern New Jersey. And for me, I define northern New Jersey as essentially anything north of Route 78. That would work for me. The third option for me from a geographic perspective would be to go across the river. Not across the Hudson River, but across the Delaware River into eastern Pennsylvania. And so like the Poconos, Lehigh Valley, some of that space. Still, doable commute. Being a reverse commute is not going to be as bad as going into Manhattan per se. So I kind of like that as my options. My question for you would be, what would you list as the locations where you most want to work? Now, you don't need to answer that here and now publicly, but that's the question that you want to define for your job search. What are those locations? And I have clients, for example, who will say, well, Paul, I really want to work remotely and I'm in the tech industry. Well, okay, then, are there options for you to work in Silicon Valley and work here remotely for that? Or maybe down in the tech triangle of South Carolina, right? North Carolina. Is that an option for you? What about the Boston area? So we could put that as a location. I want to work in Silicon Valley, but I want to work remotely in Silicon Valley. Okay, great. Where do you most want to work? Let's list those places out. The second step then is to identify the industries in which you want to work. Now, for me, the post-secondary education industry would be the place that I would most want to work. That's a pretty large sector, though, when we think about it, because there's two-year colleges, there's public four-year colleges, there's private four-year colleges, there's trade schools, right? There's at least 4 different segments that I could identify within that industry. And if I were to look just at that 20-mile radius from my home and look at the entire post-secondary education sector, there's actually about 30 or 40 organizations that fit that description. That's a little bit too big. So I've broken it down into a couple of different subcategories or sub-industries, if you will. The 2-year public college sector, the 4-year public college sector, and that 4-year private college sector. Now, earlier I mentioned the private for-profit trade school sector, and I really don't want to work in that space, so I've eliminated that from my chart because it's not a space that I want to be in. But if we look just at the 20-mile radius from home of the 2-year colleges, there's about 6 or 7 of them within 20 miles of my home. The 4-year public colleges, there's actually about 8 or 9 within that 20-mile radius. And the 4-year private, there's another 7 or so in that 20-mile radius. So I can break those down into those smaller segments, and that's now a doable segment for me to go after and realistically focus on at any given moment in time. And that's part of what we're trying to do here. First, you see how it's enlarged my view because while looking at the post-secondary education sector within those three different geographies, that actually covers probably about 150 different organizations. That's a lot of schools to look at. But then when I break that down into those three different geographies and then further break it down into those different industry sectors, now I've got manageable chunks and I can realistically consider which ones are most appropriate for me. Adding in that third variable, the role or function that I want. And in my case, I would want to stay at this point in my life and in my career as a career advisor or a career counselor, in essence, that frontline entry level kind of a role. Now, I'm certainly qualified for and actually have held the career services department manager role. But at this point, I'd be happy to be that individual contributor and in the career services, career advisor role. If I were to say, no, I really would like not just the career advisor role, but also the career manager role, well, now I would double the number of target markets that I would look at. So we have questions on how this is functioning and how it's helping us to grow what we're looking at and then be able to focus in on where we're going to go. By the way, we'll go really quick if we have no questions. So I'd look forward to hearing any thoughts and comments anyone has.
What if money is more of an issue than any of those three things?
It's a great question. Once we've defined those targets, then we can say, well, you know what, the two-year colleges probably don't pay well enough. And so I can eliminate those targets from my search because they're just not going to give me the compensation that I'm looking for. Right? So you play those factors in, but kind of after the fact. So right now we want to look at the breadth of what is possible, and then we can start honing in more closely on what is realistically appropriate for where I need to go next in my career. Does that make sense? All right, so let's, so from here, what we would want to do is prioritize it and look at, of these 9 options, in my case, which one is the one that I would be really most excited to work for? And which one would be the least interesting to me? And you can kind of see I've actually put them in that priority order already. The 4-year public schools is really most where I would want to be. And so I don't care if I'm doing that in the 20-mile radius, the northern third of New Jersey, or going into Delaware. I really want to work for that 4-year school. If I can't do it in a public school, and there I'm thinking about compensation and pay is one of the reasons why I would put them first, by the way, then I'd go to the 4-year private schools. And then I would look at those as the next best options in this order of location. And my last priority would be the 2-year schools. And again, if I'm going to work at a 2-year school, then I want to work home, closer to home. So I would want to look at them in this order. And I may even say, you know what, the value of the compensation at these schools in Lehigh probably isn't high enough to make it worth my travel to that space. So I might just eliminate that target altogether for that reason. So think from your perspective now, what is the most desirable place for you to want to work? How would you prioritize these target markets? Once we've done that, then we can take a deeper dive into each one of those targets. So as I mentioned earlier, there are 7 or 8 schools that fit within the 20-mile radius, 4-year public colleges, career advisor role. There's about 8 schools that fit into that target market from my home, right? And here's the list of those schools. What's great is now you come to me and say, so Paul, where do you want to work? Well, I'll tell you, the number 1 school I'm looking to get into right now is Montclair State University, but I'd be very happy to work at William Patterson or Ramapo as well. So tell me, do you know anybody who works at any of those schools? And you see how from a networking perspective, it really focuses me and my network on where I want to work and how they can best help me. What I've also done is enough research to identify how many people do each one of those schools hire to do the job that I want. And it's really important to know how big is that market, right? So if we look at these schools, and I've included Rutgers here, even though it's outside that 20-mile radius, because it fits with Rutgers Newark. So I'm just looking at that as one organization, but really New Brunswick would be a separate school. So there's the 8 schools. They hire a total of 33 people to do the work that I do. Now notice I'm saying all the people they hire in those roles is 33 people. I'm not saying that there are 33 positions open today. That's not important to me. What's important is how many positions total are available. And the truth is, over the course of about 3 months, the likelihood that one of those 33 positions becomes available as an open position is pretty high. So I know I've got a pretty good chance of getting an interview in this space for this number of schools and number of positions. Let's look at those statistics a little bit further. And this comes, directly from Sales 101. You talk to any salesman, they will tell you on a business to business level, here are the kinds of numbers we need in order to make a sale. And typically they would need 100 potential positions or 100 potential customers to get about 40 of them that are interested in really talking to them at all and hearing anything they have to say about their product. And from those 40, they'll probably find, 4 or 5, maybe 3 that are interested in actually having a sales presentation done. And from those that do the sales presentation, at least one of them will want to buy. So we can use those same numbers in our job search. Now, it does vary somewhat depending on the level of position that you're going after. And I would suggest that if you're in an entry level space, you probably want to look at about 200 positions to get about 25, maybe 50 organizations that are going to be interested in talking to you further. And from those 25 organizations, you'll probably get 5 to 7 interviews. From those interviews, you should get at least 2 offers. And that's what we want to have happening, right? So where do you fit in this chart? Now, again, I'm not looking at openings. I'm looking at total number of positions. And let me give you an example of why that's important. First off, we don't know how many of those companies or organizations are looking to expand and maybe have new positions that they want to hire for, but they've not started marketing for those positions yet. And maybe by virtue of the fact that you've networked into the organization, they're now willing to pull the trigger and open the position up. So I don't want to look at openings because that's limiting me. By looking at openings, traditionally employers, and think about the companies you've worked for, don't they do this? By the time they're publicly posting an opening, they've already identified at least a handful of candidates, if not the specific person they want to hire. So if all I'm doing is a job search looking for openings, I'm only going after jobs that people have already identified, the hiring authority has already identified the person they're going to fill that role with. So I need to be looking at positions before they're publicly offered, which means I need to be looking at the organizations that hire people to do the work I want to do, not the organizations that have openings. And again, if we look at the statistics, 100 openings equals an opportunity for me to have an offer. And so I want to work towards that. The other thing that happens quite often is when you've networked into the position, at that point, if there's an underperformer, the hiring manager may say, gee, we've got Paul already on the hook to take this position. Let me get rid of this underperformer so that I can bring Paul in because I think he's going to do a better job. Now, I never want to see someone else lose their job, and I certainly don't want to take that job from someone else. But hell, I need to work too. I need a job. So if that's what it takes for me to get the job, I'm not going to say no, but I'm not specifically going after that option. The point is, we don't know what's going on internally within the organization to know what options are available for people to get hired in the role that I want. So I need to network into those organizations before they have an opening in order to most increase my opportunity to work there. So that's how these statistics work. Questions on this? All right, so let's talk about how are we going to research for those jobs and find those organizations. So here's some of the questions that I would like to know about an organization before I even consider whether or not it's worth my applying to them. So I'm going to create my list of questions that I need to research for those organizations. What do you need to know in order to say, yes, I want to work for this company? Those are the questions we want to get at. So it could be things like, who are their competition? The nice part about that question is it helps me to expand my search beyond what I already know. Did I miss out on some organizations in that target market that I couldn't find out about otherwise, right? I always want to know, how does my role impact on the bottom line of the organization? And in today's world, we might want to think about the triple bottom line as it's discussed in sustainability, and that would be not just profit, but also people and planet. Right? So how does my role impact on the profit of the organization? How does my role impact on the other people, whether they're employees or customers of the organization? And how does my role impact on the planet and sustainability and environmental impacts of my role? So I want to have some sense of those things, especially Gen Z and some Gen Y millennials are very much interested in that triple bottom line when they're looking at an employer. Where's this organization within the industry? Is it on the rise or on the falling within the industry? Where's the industry? Is it rising or contracting? For example, right now, I could tell you that within the college industry, the post-secondary industry, private sector, and in particular, liberal arts colleges are starting to suffer and have concerns. And so I may not want to look at that 4-year private college industry any longer. Or I may want to be more specific about the schools that I consider, knowing what their financial stability is over the next 3 to 5 years, because I don't want to go work for somebody that's going to potentially either go out of business or maybe be taken over by another organization, changing the culture. So there's a lot of reasons why these are the kinds of questions that I would want to ask and get information about prior to applying. So how do we get that information? Well, there's a bunch of options for us to do that. This slide gives just some examples of it. You know, a Google search is always great. I keep forgetting I need to go in and change this to dataaxle.com/reference solutions. But you could do the search in Google under reference solutions and it'll come up. It's a great database, which, by the way, thank you, Andrew, and the New Jersey Library System, because that organization has purchased for every public library in the state access to this database. And this database is amazing because it provides down to the local level, where does any company in the country have an office location? And it'll tell you a lot of basic information about that organization, revenue, number of employees, and it'll do it not just on the large corporate scale, but also potentially on the individual location scale. Plus, it'll give you the names of some of the key players within that organization. Now, like all databases of this size, it's not always 100% accurate, but I believe they're on about a 3-year rotation to try and update all the information in reference solutions. So you can really hone in on a micro local level. Who are the organizations that fit those target markets that I'm going after? Dun and Bradstreet Hoovers is another similar database. It's also one that is a fee for service. So it's not available at all libraries, but it may be in some of the libraries that you would look at. Some of the county libraries might have it. Many of the 4-year public research libraries will have access to that. The downside that I found with Dun and Bradstreet is it's really primarily looking at publicly traded organizations, whereas Reference Solutions is all organizations, public or not. The Securities and Exchange Commission is also a great place to go to get information on an employer, especially if they are publicly traded. When you look at Glassdoor or even Indeed, these are great organizations to get information, but a lot of their information is based on their customers' input. And so they'll get reviews that will say the company is absolutely horrible, and they'll get reviews that say the company is the best thing since sliced bread and even better than that. So we need to take those reviews with a grain of salt and recognize that both of the outliers are biased, and somewhere in the middle is probably the truth. But it can give us some ideas of what the concerns may be and what some of the great things about an employer may be, so that when we're going forward to start talking to people about that company, we have some sense of what we want to talk about, what we want to ask about, and can validate the information that we've done in research. Company websites always a great place to go. Heck, I even say let's just go and actually drive into the building and visit the company, personally. It's amazing how much you can learn from those websites and from going into the building. I want to read as much publicly available material on the organization as I possibly can, especially their annual report, if they provide one, their marketing materials, all will give us insights into the organization and potentially give us insights into the industry as well as to their competitors. So look at those options as well. Other great places to get additional, not only research about any specific industry or position or function, but also about additional companies to consider are your professional and industry-focused associations and your alumni association. So for example, if you're an accountant, you probably want to be a part of the New Jersey CPA because you're going to learn more about what's going on in accounting within New Jersey. Project managers want to be part of Project Management Institute New Jersey chapter, or maybe PMI Delaware Valley chapter for South Jersey. But you want to identify the local chapter of the professional association or the industry association for the space where you want to work. And again, your local library is a really great source for that information, because the librarians, especially the information or research librarians or reference librarians, are really fantastic at finding the data that you don't have or can't find for yourself. So for example, you may do a Google search on professional associations in ABC field, and you may get information, you may not. But if you go to the library, they will be able to direct you to a website, if not a print version of, for example, the index, I think it's called the Index of Professional Associations in America, right? Which is just a publication of all of the associations that are registered in the country. What a better place to go to get information than to your library. I mentioned the alumni associations because of the 80 clients that I had last year, fully 73% of them said the best networking that they did, the place where they got the most valuable research on an organization and potential leads for jobs came from alumni from the school in which they graduated. So I would encourage you strongly to get back in touch with your alumni associations and ask them for connections to people who are working in the field or in the role that you want to be in. They will know of who those folks are, have a listing of them, a database that you can search to get them. And then typically, if you were to come to me, for example, and say, Paul, I'm a graduate of Florida Institute of Technology, which is my alma mater, I'm going to want to talk to you and share experiences. You graduated, 10 years after me. Really cool. Let's compare notes on professors that we had and who were the memorable ones, right? What are some of the changes maybe that happened on campus? We're going to have stuff that we're going to want to talk about just by virtue of the fact we have the connection of our university. But then we'll take it that next step and start talking about, well, how can we help each other today? And the help that you want is, can you help me find a job in one of these organizations? Or do you know other organizations that fit within this particular industry sector? Our goal at this point is to become somewhat of an expert on the industry in particular, and in general on the organizations that we're most interested in working for. Questions on this? So now that we've figured out who our priority target markets are, we've got some basic information and research done on those targets, it's time for us to go start networking into the organizations, right? So we've finished this preparation phase of our job search, and now we're starting to do the networking, the real hard work of a job search. And you'll notice that I want to go after my target markets not in priority order, but kind of in this 3-1-2 priority order. And here's why. The third priority target market, I'll be happy to get a job there, but it's not my ideal place to work. And it's likely the place that's not going to be able to afford me the way that I want to be compensated. So I'm going to start with those organizations that I'm least desiring to work for, because then I can practice. I can learn more. I can become an expert in the job search process, in the networking process, in the interview process. I'm going to approach those companies with less stress, less anxiety, because if it works, great. If it doesn't, who cares, right? So let me go and get all of my jitters out of the way and become the expert at the process with my third priority market. And I'm going to do that networking first. Then when I am the expert and I've kind of worked that market to death, I'll be working now on my A list, that first priority target market. I'm on my A game, so I want to go after that A list now. And I'll network with them and work like hell to get a job in that priority. And when it doesn't happen there, God forbid, I still have those companies that, hey, I'd be really happy to work for them. I'd be happier if I was working for these guys, but I'll be happy to work for those second priority target market. And so let's go after those jobs when I don't get a job here. And let's look a little bit more at how this networking takes place. There's 3 different levels of networking that we're going to do. There's general networking with people who can just introduce us to those hiring authorities. And then we're going to network with those hiring authorities so that when they are ready to hire someone and they have an interview to do, they'll think of us first. And now we'll start doing that interviewing. So kind of what happens is it'll take a month or 2 of general networking for those folks to feel comfortable to introduce us to hiring managers. So we'll start talking to those hiring managers. And after a month or 2 of talking to them, then they're going to start coming out to the point where there's an interview process ready for them to do. And so we'll interview with them and ultimately get an offer. But as any good salesman would tell you, I don't want to just leave it at this, because when I run out of companies to work with here, I don't have to start from scratch down here. So as I'm done doing any general networking that I can here, and I'm talking to as many hiring managers as possible here, I'm going to start doing my general networking down here. I'm already an expert at this point, this phase of the process, and so I can start talking to them. And by the time these hiring managers here are starting to interview me, I'm going to be talking with hiring managers down here. And I'll likely have run out of general networking conversations to have with these folks. So let's start the networking conversations down here. And by the time I've got job offers here, I'm going to be interviewing here and talking to hiring managers here. So I'm constantly refilling my funnel with more prospects to talk to. This does a couple of different things that's really valuable to us. First off, if I'm getting interviews at this point, I can then go to these hiring managers and say, hey, listen, I'm getting close to an offer with some of these companies that I'll be working for if I have to, but I'd rather work for you. Is there any way we can push the process faster so that we can get you to the point of interviewing and making an offer before I have to accept an offer with one of these companies that I really don't want to work for? The other thing I can do is I can say to these companies here, hey, listen, I'm starting to interview with companies that are at a different tier, a different level than you are. And they're willing to pay me $10, $20, $30,000 more than your starting salary. So is there any way you can boost your salary to come closer to these guys so that I can say yes to you rather than having to say yes to one of them? So in essence, what we're doing is we're putting ourselves in a much more powerful position for negotiating our success when we do this kind of a process. Questions on this thought and how this works? So I hope you could see then there's a lot of value to creating a target market chart, being able to expand the list of all the organizations that we're going to go after and consider for working, using the three variables: location, industry, and role or function, and then prioritizing them so that we can practice well, become an expert in the industry, and put our best foot forward when we're going after those most important organizations. Plus, it's going to help us in helping our network to better provide contacts for us and the assistance that we need in moving our job search forward. I happen to facilitate quite a few groups that are job search related. These are some of them. These first four here are groups that are designed to be peer support groups. And the way they work is everybody on the call will get, say, 10 minutes. And the first minute or two, you're going to give us a little bit of your background, a little bit about your job search, and then what is your greatest challenge in your job search today? And the rest of your 10 minutes is going to be the whole group brainstorming to resolve that challenge for you. So if any of these seem of interest or value to you, I'd be happy to connect you with them and get you the links. They all meet by Zoom. This one is specifically for people who are new to their career, younger in their career. This group is specifically for people who are in the LGBTQ community. This group is for graduates of Florida Institute of Technology. But if your university doesn't have a similar type organization or group, have your alumni affairs office contact me, and I'll be happy to create a group for that university. This group is pretty much anybody and everybody who wants to are welcome to show up. And again, just reach out to me and I will get you the contact information and the Zoom links for any one of those. This group meets every Wednesday morning, and it's a different style completely. It's called a speakers group. So every Wednesday morning, we'll have a speaker come in and talk on a topic related to job search. And so you get access to a whole bunch of professionals, whether they be recruiters, HR professionals, or career coaches that are talking about how you can improve your job search today. And one thing I didn't add on this list that some of you may be interested in, the New Jersey, now let me get the name right, the Council of New Jersey State College Locals, which represents 7 or 8 college, the unions of 7 or 8 of New Jersey state colleges, has recently contracted with myself and another coach to do a training program on the job search process for people who are being downsized or laid off within those colleges and universities throughout the state system. So if that's happening to you, again, reach out to me and I'll get you connected with the right people to see if we can't get you into that program. It's a 12-hour training program, 6 sessions for 2 hours each, that will go through the entire job search process and prepare you to be an expert in job search for your next position. Anyone else who'd be interested in something like that, again, please just let me know and I'll be happy to help you with that. These are some other organizations where I'll be speaking in the next month or two and the topics that I'll be speaking on. So if you're interested in any of those, you can reach out to the organizations listed here or come directly to me and I can get you connected with those folks. And I know that both Andrew and I have already put in the chat once my contact information, but here's all of my contacts again. This is the book that I wrote, Work Search Buddies, Finding a Job with a Little Help from a Friend. It's a really small book. It's $5 if you're interested in it. But the key, in fact, if you tell me that you were on this presentation, you can get it for no cost. The key to it is, I don't want to go through my job search alone. I'd like to have somebody walking alongside me, going through it with me, and hopefully someone else who's in job search. And so how can we do that together? This book tells you all about how to find a buddy and how to work with a buddy in your job search. So that's what I'd love to share with you. I appreciate your time today. And I am going to ask 2 questions of everybody. Even though Andrew's going to send you a survey, I would like to get some feedback from you all from what you thought of today's presentation. So the first question I'd like to ask anyone who wishes just to type your answer into the chat. What did you like most about what I presented? What is your takeaway from today's conversation? We'll give folks a minute or so to start putting some of that information into the chat. And Andrew, is there anything that I've missed that is in the chat or in the Q&A?
No. Could you go back to the target market search kind of template that you had in the beginning? We had a couple people that joined late, and I just wanted them to be able to see kind of what that looked like, how you structured conducting your target market search.
So this is where we're talking about right
No,
here, or
no,
do you want
the previous
the chart itself?
the chart from the beginning. Yeah, that
there
one.
you go. Okay. Yeah, so a target market consists of 3 variables: location, industry, and function. Every time you change one of those, you've created a new target market. And our goal is to identify all the organizations that fit that target and the number of people that they hire to do that role, so that you can identify how big is your target market and who are the organizations you want to work for.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
How would you
thank
adopt?
you, Janet.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Janet, for that comment. I appreciate it. Go ahead, Andrew.
How would you adopt this model to something that is more promotional based, such as like a civil service position, or something that is more union controlled, where it's based off of seniority or something rather than, who you know when you know?
Yes. So you still need to identify the organizations, right? And so even though you're in the union here, you could potentially look to go to a different union or a different union position in a different location, right? So you still want to know where those organizations are, where those locations are, and who are the hiring authorities in those locations, so that you can then work with them to work within your union system to make that move. The other things that I think would be of value is that there's, you know, no matter how tightly controlled the unions are, there's still the human factor. And so we need to get to know who the humans involved in the process are. And by talking with those hiring managers in the place where you want to go, even if it's a promotion within your own organization, they're going to give you the feedback you need because you're going to ask the questions to get it so that you can best prepare yourself for that next step, that next level. Best prepare yourself for passing that next civil service exam. Right? So networking is the critical part of a successful job search. And what this can help you to do is define and identify who are all the right places and people to be networking with to get you to that next step. So I know it's not a direct correlation, but I think there is still enough of a correlation that there is value. Does that help, Andrew?
Yes, thank you.
The second question that I was going to hopefully ask of all of you is there anything you'd like to see me do different or better in this conversation or in this presentation? And this is the best way for me to get feedback so I can improve on my craft. So if you have any thoughts, be happy to see those in the chat or in the Q&A. Well, Andrew, I appreciate you taking the time and giving me the opportunity to speak today. And again, if anybody would like to learn more about this, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. My first conversation with everybody is always at no cost. And I also tell everyone this same thing as well. If you have a quick question that you need an answer to for your job search, by all means, just reach out and ask, because I'd rather answer that question and get you moving forward than have you flounder and not be employed. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate it. Somebody asked about the slides, if they'll be available. I think they can contact you directly and you'll be able to work out.
Absolutely.
I cannot provide them. They're technically copyrighted material and stuff. So, but if you want to reach out to Paul directly, he'll be able to.
I can get them to you on an individual basis. Yes.
Yes. So. All right. Well, I guess that's everything. So again, Paul, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It gave us a lot to think about, and what kind of the old montage is finding a job or searching for a job is a full-time job.
It is.
But if you put in the effort, then you can get the results. It's kind of a nice takeaway, I think, from the presentation today too.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for attending. We hope you found it very informative. This program is being recorded, so everybody will get a link who registered. So look out for that in your email. And please feel free to contact Paul with any other questions that you may have. So just want to say be safe, be well, and hopefully we'll see you soon at one of our next programs.